Emma stood at the edge of the old wooden pier, the wind pulling at her hair as if urging her to let go of everything she had been holding inside. 3 months ago, her life had been full. Plans, security, a future she thought was steady. Now she felt as if she was staring into a fog she couldn't see through, waiting for something that refused to arrive. Every morning she woke believing today might be the day God finally answered. And every night she returned to bed with the same unanswered silence. Her friends told her to stay strong, but none of them saw how her hands shook when she opened rejection emails, or how she paused before unlocking her door, bracing herself for the familiar heaviness inside her empty apartment. Yet today felt strangely different. A tension hung in the air, sharp, expectant, as though heaven itself was holding its breath. Emma couldn't explain it, but she sensed something shifting, something quietly rearranging beneath the surface of her frustration and fear. As she looked out across the water, a single thought rose uninvited, almost whispered into her chest. What if the waiting wasn't punishment, but preparation? The question stirred her heart, unsettling her just enough to make her take one step forward, one step closer to whatever God was aligning behind the scenes, something she didn't yet see, but something that felt very, very close. If this story is touching your heart already, take a moment to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from. Your engagement helps these messages reach more people. Emma's life had not always felt this fragile. Only a year earlier, she had walked through her days with a quiet certainty, believing she knew exactly where God was leading her. She worked at a small community arts center, teaching children to paint scenes from their imaginations. The job didn't make her wealthy, but it made her feel alive. She loved watching kids create bold colors on blank pages, unafraid of mistakes. They reminded her of courage, innocence, and the way God often uses tiny beginnings to form something beautiful. But when the center lost funding and closed without warning, Emma found herself drifting. Her income vanished, her plans dissolved. Her confidence slowly eroded under the weight of, "We regret to inform you," messages that arrived week after week. Even the places she interviewed at seemed unsure, smiling politely, praising her enthusiasm, then choosing someone else. Still, Emma did what she could. She filled her days searching for opportunities, volunteering when she could, and trying to keep her home warm with soft music and whispered gratitude. She often paused by the window before bed, whispering, "Thank you, God, for staying with me even now." Those small moments of worship kept her heart from collapsing entirely. But two people in particular held her up more than they knew. Her neighbor, Mrs. Harding, and her childhood friend Jacob. Mrs. Harding, a silver-haired widow with a gentle voice, would often tap on Emma's door carrying a basket of muffins or soup. She never pried, never pressed. She simply offered presence. "You don't have to be strong all the time, dear," she'd say, patting Emma's shoulder. "Just stay open to what God is shaping." Jacoby, on the other hand, pushed her to keep moving forward. He called every few days, whether she answered or not. "You're not finished," he'd say through the phone. "You're just in the middle of the story." Emma didn't always believe him, but she appreciated his certainty. One chilly morning, 2 weeks after losing another promising opportunity, Emma took a walk through town to quiet her mind. The streets were lined with old brick buildings and small businesses that had been standing longer than she had been alive. The bakery owner waved at her, the florist smiled, and even the librarian greeted her warmly. It reminded her that she wasn't as invisible as she felt. As she walked, she caught sight of a group of children painting on large canvases outside a cafe, bright blues, yellows, and reds splashing together with no hesitation. The scene struck her deeply. Her heart tightened as if someone had placed a hand around it, not painfully, but with a firm reminder. She missed her work. She missed teaching. She missed watching creativity bloom in uncertain souls. And beneath all of that emotion, she felt something else, a gentle nudge, almost like a tug from within, as if God was saying, "I haven't forgotten what I placed in you." The children's laughter echoed as she stood frozen, caught between sorrow and hope. One little girl dropped her brush and ran to her mother, leaving behind a canvas streaked with messy, beautiful colors. Emma stared at the incomplete painting and realized it looked exactly how her life felt, unfinished, uncertain, but full of possibility. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of curiosity about what God might be doing in the background, not clarity, but curiosity. And sometimes that is where faith quietly begins again. Emma continued walking, her footsteps slow but steady, unaware that the next loss waiting around the corner would feel even heavier, and yet would ultimately lead her closer to the doorway God was preparing, one she couldn't yet imagine. 2 days after her walk through town, hope slipped from Emma's hands again, but this time in a way that cut deeper than she expected. She had applied for a position at a local youth foundation, a role that combined art, mentorship, and community support. It felt perfect, almost too perfect, the kind of job she could imagine herself thriving in for years. After a promising interview, the director had told her, "We'll let you know soon." Emma carried that sentence like a tiny flame in her chest. But on a grey Thursday afternoon, while Emma stood in line at the grocery store, she overheard 2 women talking excitedly near the fruit display. "I'm so happy for Claire," one said. "She got the Youth Foundation job, starts next week." Emma froze. The apples in her hand slipped back into the basket. She tried to breathe, but her chest tightened. She hadn't received an email, no call, no message. Her phone vibrated. She looked down. Subject, application status, "Thank you for your time." Rejection. Again. Her vision blurred. She stepped out of line quickly, afraid someone would notice the sting in her eyes, but people did notice, just not in the way she hoped. Outside, near the parking lot, she passed 2 men from her old art center. They recognized her instantly. "Emma," one of them said with surprise. "Hey, haven't seen you in a while. Heard the center's closure hit you hard." The other man added, "Yeah, tough break. I guess things didn't pan out for you after that, huh?" His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried an edge of assumption, like her life had gone off course and he already knew the ending. They exchanged polite smiles, wished her well, and walked away, but their comments hung over her like a shadow. As she reached her car, she saw Mrs. Harding approaching, her face warm and concerned. "Emma, dear, everything all right?" Emma tried to answer, but words wouldn't come. She was holding too much, too many no's, too many almosts. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. I thought maybe this time." Mrs. Harding gently placed a hand on her arm. "Sometimes the doors that close the loudest are the ones God never meant for us to walk through." But Emma felt the weight of humiliation rising. She imagined the community whispering, "Poor Emma, still trying, still failing, not out of cruelty, but because people talk, and stories travel faster than truth." She drove home with the radio off, the silence thick. When she entered her apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. For the first time, she whispered a question she hadn't dared to ask out loud. "God, are you still writing my story? Or did I miss something along the way?" The room felt too quiet, too still. She stared at the ceiling, fighting the urge to believe she had reached the end of her purpose. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it, exhausted by the possibility of more disappointment. A faint ache settled in her heart, not just from the job she lost, but from the fear that she was losing herself. What Emma didn't know What she couldn't see was that this painful moment, this sting of public judgment and personal defeat, would become the turning point heaven had been preparing. The ground beneath her was shifting, but not to bury her. It was clearing space for something new to grow. The next morning, Emma woke before sunrise, her heart still heavy from the sting of the previous day. She sat by her window, watching the sky shift from pale grey to soft gold. The world felt quiet, almost reverent, as if waiting for her to breathe again. She wrapped her hands around a warm cup of tea and let the stillness settle over her. For the first time in a while, she didn't rush to fix anything. She didn't open her laptop. She didn't check her phone. She simply sat, letting silence do what words could not. As the sun slowly rose, a soft clarity emerged. Her disappointment wasn't just about the job. It was about the feeling of being unseen, unheard, forgotten. But in that quiet morning light, she sensed something tender, an unspoken reminder that God's timing wasn't neglect. It was intention. Emma closed her eyes. Lord, guide me. Give me strength to walk the path you prepared. The prayer was small, humble, sincere, and when she whispered it, something inside her loosened. Not a breakthrough, not an answer. Just a gentle release, like she had finally let God step into the space she had been trying to fill with worry. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, Mrs. Harding stood there holding a folded blanket. "I'm cleaning out some things," she said with a smile. "Thought you might like this. It belonged to my late husband. Kept him warm during long evenings of prayer." Emma held the blanket to her chest, oddly moved. "Thank you. Truly." Mrs. Harding studied her carefully. "Emma, waiting doesn't mean you're behind. Sometimes God slows our steps so he can place something in our hands we would have rushed past." Those words settled deep. Emma nodded, but her mind was still processing the truth of them. After the neighbor left, Emma sat again by the window, the blanket across her lap. She whispered a quiet expression of worship, not loud, not dramatic, just honest. "Thank you, God, for staying near even when I feel lost." And for the first time in weeks, she felt a faint stirring of hope, small but steady, like the first warm breeze after winter. This moment of reflection didn't solve everything, but it shifted something crucial. Emma's heart began to soften, open and prepare for the unexpected, for the unseen door God was already building in the shadows of her waiting. She didn't know it yet, but her first blessing was about to break through the surface. Emma stepped outside for fresh air, the morning light brushing gently across her face. Something in her spirit felt different, quietly steadier, as if her small prayer had cleared a corner of the fog inside her. She walked slowly down the path behind her building, letting the breeze weave through her thoughts. Every step reminded her that she wasn't giving up. She was simply learning to wait with trust instead of fear. For the first time in a long while, she felt a whisper of expectation, the sense that her story wasn't stuck, it was turning. She paused beneath a tall oak tree, lifted her eyes and breathed deeply. "God, I'm still here," she murmured, almost as a declaration of faith. And somehow, that felt like movement. Little did Emma know that the very moment she chose to stand in hope rather than defeat was the moment heaven began aligning the next chapter, one that would arrive sooner than she imagined. If you've ever felt like Emma, standing between what broke you and what God is preparing, keep watching. Her first unexpected blessing is about to appear. That afternoon, Emma decided to walk through town again. She didn't know why. She just felt drawn, as if something was nudging her forward. The streets were busier than usual, voices rising and falling like a gentle chorus. She passed the cafe where the children had painted days earlier, noticing new canvases leaning against the wall, their colors vibrant and untouched. As she stood there admiring them, a voice called out, "Excuse me, are you Emma?" She turned to see a woman in her early 40s stepping out of the cafe. She wore an apron splattered with paint and had the warm smile of someone who loved what she did. "I'm Lily," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I run the community art cafe here. A mother from town mentioned you used to teach at the art center." Emma nodded cautiously. "I did, until it closed." Lily's eyes brightened. "Then maybe you're exactly who I've been looking for." Before Emma could answer, Lily gestured for her to follow. Inside the cafe, light spilled across wooden tables and shelves filled with art supplies. Children laughed near the back, painting freely as their parents chatted. It felt alive, warm, hopeful. And for the first time in months, Emma felt like she had stepped into a space where her heart recognized itself. "We've been overwhelmed lately," Lily said. "More families want creative programs for their kids, but I'm stretched thin. Someone told me you have a gift with children, so I'd love to offer you a part-time position. You'd lead a weekly art workshop, maybe more if things go well." Emma blinked, stunned. She hadn't applied. She hadn't chased this. It had simply come to her, quietly, unexpectedly, like grace slipping through a door she didn't know could open. "Why me?" Emma asked softly. "Because," Lily replied, "I've heard how you make children feel brave with their creativity, and that's rare." The words hit Emma with a warmth she hadn't felt in months. She swallowed, her eyes stinging, not with despair, but with the gentle surprise of God's kindness showing up in a place she never thought to look. "I would love to do it," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "Truly." Lily clapped her hands together. "Wonderful! We start next week." As Emma walked home, she felt lighter. She whispered a quiet expression of worship beneath her breath. "Thank you, God. I didn't see this coming, but you did." The part-time job wasn't everything she needed, but it was something, a seed, a beginning. Proof that God was still building paths in places she had overlooked, and deep down, Emma sensed that this blessing was not the final answer, but the first step toward a doorway she hadn't yet imagined. Emma stepped into her new role the following week, with a mix of joy and trembling nerves. The children welcomed her with bright smiles and messy hands, and the parents seemed relieved to have someone attentive and encouraging guiding the room. For the first time in months, Emma felt her heart waking up again, like God had breathed something fresh into the dry places of her life. But just as she found her rhythm, another storm arrived. One Friday afternoon, as she finished cleaning the brushes and organizing the paints, Lily approached her with an uneasy expression. "Emma, do you have a moment?" Her tone made Emma's stomach tighten. She nodded. "I just got a message from the city," Lily said with a sigh. "They're reviewing all small business permits because of recent complaints. Someone filed a report saying our workshops aren't following regulations. They're sending an inspector next week." She paused. "If they find anything wrong, the art cafe could be temporarily shut down." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "But everything we do is safe. The kids are supervised. We follow all guidelines." "I know," Lily said gently, "but these inspections can be unpredictable. And if we close, even for a short time, I won't be able to keep paying staff." The unspoken words hovered heavily, "including you." Emma nodded slowly, trying to stay steady. She had just started rebuilding her hope. Was it already slipping away again? She walked home under a sky thick with clouds, the kind that carried the promise of rain and uncertainty. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she arrived at her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her landlord reminding her that rent would be due soon. Normally, she could stretch what she had, but without guaranteed hours, without stability, Anxiety stirred sharply inside her. She sank onto her couch, staring at the blank wall. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why, after everything finally felt like it was turning?" As the evening darkened, doubt crept in like a shadow stretching across her mind. What if she wasn't meant for this work anymore? What if every door she tried to step through would always close? What if she had misunderstood God's timing after all? The next day at the cafe, she tried to stay focused. She guided the children through a painting exercise, helping them create soft landscapes with gentle brushstrokes. But in the middle of the session, a parent pulled her aside. "I heard the cafe might shut down," the woman said, concerned. "You just got here, didn't you? What a shame. Seems like you have such a pattern of unfortunate timing." Emma felt the words like a sting. She smiled politely, but inside, her heart cracked. A pattern. Was that how people saw her now? The comment replayed in her mind long after the class ended. By the time she walked home, the delicate hope she had been carrying felt bruised, yet even in her discouragement, something deep inside refused to fully collapse. A quiet resilience, a soft, stubborn spark that whispered, "This isn't the end of the story, but trials rarely come alone." 2 days before the inspection, the cafe's sink suddenly malfunctioned, flooding part of the workspace. Pipes rattled, water spilled across the floor, and Lily nearly broke into tears. "We don't have time for repairs," she said, gripping her forehead. "The inspector will shut us down for sure." Emma looked around at the mess, at the place that had given her a glimpse of purpose again, and felt a deep ache rise in her chest. Everything she had started to rebuild seemed to be crumbling, one piece at a time. She knelt beside Lily, helping her gather towels, refusing to let panic take over. But fear pulsed quietly beneath her determination. At the end of the night, after the water was cleaned and the room was still, Emma stood alone in the quiet cafe. She inhaled deeply, steadying her breath. She didn't pray out loud this time. She simply whispered in her heart, "God, don't let this be the end." She didn't know it yet, but this breaking point was the final valley before her purpose would unfold with clarity and light. God was not abandoning her. He was positioning her. The morning of the inspection arrived with a quiet stillness, the kind that settles over a place right before something shifts. Emma walked to the cafe early, long before anyone else arrived. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and paused. Even with the wooden floors still a little damp from the repaired pipes, the room carried a peace she couldn't explain. She walked slowly between the tables, running her fingers across the edges of the easels. Each one reminded her of a child who had laughed, tried, failed, tried again. They painted the way she lived, messy, hopeful, unsure, brave. As she reached the center of the room, a sudden thought struck her, clear and unmistakable. You were never here just to teach art. You were here to lift others who were afraid to begin. The realization washed over her. Maybe the waiting, the losses, the unexpected detours, maybe none of them had been random. Maybe God had been preparing her heart to guide others through the very kind of uncertainty she had learned to survive. A soft knock sounded at the door. Lily slipped in, looking nervous but grateful Emma had arrived early. "I didn't sleep all night," she admitted. "We'll get through this," Emma said gently. "We're not alone." Moments later, the inspector entered, polite, serious, clipboard in hand. He moved through the cafe one step at a time, checking supplies, examining paperwork, measuring safety distances, inspecting the recently repaired sink. Lily wrung her hands. Emma stood beside her, steadying her breath. Halfway through, the inspector paused at the children's paintings displayed along the back wall. He studied them with an expression Emma couldn't read until he spoke. "These are remarkable," he said quietly. "My daughter paints like this." She struggles with confidence, but she loves it. He touched his chest, as if something stirred unexpectedly. Places like this matter. The tension in the room shifted. He continued the inspection with softened eyes. No harshness, no rush, just careful, thoughtful observation. When he finally closed his folder, Emma and Lily braced themselves. "Well," he said, "everything is in order. You're approved." Lily gasped. Emma exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The inspector offered one last gentle smile before leaving. "Keep doing what you're doing. Kids need places like this." As the door closed, Lily burst into tears, this time from relief, not fear. She hugged Emma tightly. "If you hadn't been here through all of this, I don't know what I would have done." Emma's eyes filled. She stepped back, overwhelmed not just by the approval, but by the deeper truth rising inside her. This was her purpose. Not the cafe itself, though it mattered, but the calling beneath it. To help rebuild confidence in those who felt small, to guide hesitant souls toward courage, to reflect the same gentle patience God had used on her. She closed her eyes briefly and offered a quiet prayer. "Father, thank you for leading me here. Help me keep walking where you guide." The waiting had not been wasted. It had been forming her, preparing her, positioning her for the doorway she had just stepped through, one she never even knew existed, and it was only the beginning. The days following the inspection felt different, lighter, as if a long, invisible weight had finally lifted from Emma's shoulders. Lily offered her more hours almost immediately, explaining that the cafe was planning to expand its children's program now that everything was secure. Parents began thanking Emma directly, telling her how their kids talked about her at home, how her gentle encouragement made them brave enough to try new things. But the real change was inside her. One evening, after a full day of workshops, Emma walked home through the golden light of sunset. The sky glowed with warm streaks of orange and pink, and for the first time in months she felt a deep, grounded peace. A peace that didn't come from having all the answers, but from finally understanding that God had been faithful even when she couldn't see it. She paused near the old oak tree, resting her hand on its rough bark. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Not the forced kind she had clung to during her hardest days, but the kind that rose naturally, freely. "Thank you, God," she whispered, her voice steady. "You never left me, even when I thought everything was falling apart." The words weren't dramatic. They were simply true. At home, she opened her journal, something she hadn't touched since before the art center closed. As she wrote, she realized how much she had grown, how the waiting had taught her resilience, humility, and trust. She no longer saw her delays as rejection. She saw them as redirection. And the community began to see her differently too. Parents lingered after workshops, asking her advice. Lily asked if she would consider designing a full curriculum for the cafe's growing program. Even Jacob, who visited one afternoon, watched her with quiet admiration. "You're different," he said, "stronger, more centered." Emma smiled softly. "I think I finally understand. The waiting wasn't wasted. Her steps had more purpose. Her days had more meaning. And her heart, once fragile and uncertain, now carried a quiet confidence rooted in God's faithfulness, not her circumstances. This was redemption, not just the restoration of work, but the restoration of hope, identity, and trust. The story God was writing in her life wasn't about returning to what she lost. It was about becoming who she was meant to be. Months later, Emma stood at the front of the art cafe, watching a new group of children settle into their seats. The room was alive with gentle chatter, soft laughter, and the quiet hum of creativity beginning to unfold. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, painting warm patterns across the wooden floor. Lily approached her with a grateful smile. "I don't know how we managed before you came," she said. "You've changed this place, Emma. You've given it heart." Emma shook her head humbly. "I just showed up. God did the rest." She meant it. Every moment of the journey, the losses, the disappointments, the long nights of wondering if God still saw her, had shaped her into someone steadier, softer, more attuned to those who felt small. She now recognized that every child who walked through the doors carried their own unseen battles, their own seasons of waiting, and she approached each one with the same gentle patience God had used on her. Later that afternoon, as the session ended and families gathered their things, one little girl tugged at Emma's sleeve. "Miss Emma," she said shyly, "I used to be scared to draw, but not anymore because you helped me." The words settled deep in Emma's heart. She knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "I'm really proud of you," she said softly. When the cafe finally grew quiet, Emma stood near the back wall, gazing at the display of children's paintings, bold colors, brave attempts, hopeful strokes. She lifted her face slightly, offering a quiet moment of worship. "God, thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for turning what felt like an ending into a beginning." Her voice was only a whisper, but her gratitude was full and steady. Emma didn't just find a place to work, she found a purpose to live. Emma's journey wasn't defined by the doors that closed, but by the faith it took to keep walking until the right one opened. What looked like delay was actually preparation. What felt like loss became the soil where new purpose took root. God was never late. He was never silent. He was shaping her heart, strengthening her steps, and guiding her toward a purpose she couldn't have reached without the waiting. And just like Emma, when we trust God's timing, when we stay open, steady, and willing, He leads us into places we never imagined, places built for our growth, our healing, and our calling. Everything had a purpose. If Emma's journey reminded you that God is still working in the silence, let this be your sign. Your waiting is not wasted. God is shaping you, strengthening you, and preparing something far greater than what you feel today. Take a deep breath. You are not alone on this road. And if this story spoke to your heart, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss these moments of faith and reflection. Leave a like if this message lifted your spirit, and share in the comments which city and country you're watching from. It's beautiful to see how God connects us from every corner of the world. May His peace follow you into the rest of your day.